think we're just about ready to start here. 2:43. We've got all our speakers here, and we've got a nice full house. So, in the interest of trying to get you finished on time, I'm actually going to start 1 minute early. Welcome everybody. This is session 14, Public Transport as a Main Pillar of Inclusive Development and Decarbonization. Just such a pleasure to be here. My name is Shomik Mehndiratta. I am for now the World Bank's Practice Manager for Transport in South Asia. You can see I'm particularly excited because we have colleagues here from both from Dhaka as well as from Punjab and Sindh in Pakistan. So we have, before this I used to be practice manager for the bank in Latin America, so I'm very excited. We also have a speaker from Brazil. So look, how we were going to do this, we have a 1 hour session, we have 6 or 7 panelists, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask everybody one question, give an opportunity for you to hear this, and then the time we have after that, I'd like to turn over for questions. So please keep your questions ready. I'll introduce the speakers as they come in, and I'd like to actually start with the chairman of the Dhaka Mass Transit Company in Bangladesh, Chairman Siddiq, who will talk to us. One of the most exciting things that is happening in South Asia is how Dhaka is transforming. Dhaka's traffic and traffic congestion has often been kind of legendary, and Chairman Siddiqui is starting to change it. The first line, the first metro line of Dhaka opened at the end of last year, and additional lines are under construction and in planning. So he will start, and he has got a little bit of a presentation for 7 or 8 minutes. So I thought this being so exciting, it would be great to actually get the benefit of him talking about how to deliver public transport and complex public transport, a metro line, in one of the most difficult cities to do this kind of construction in Dhaka, not just because of the density, not just because of the traffic, but also because of the geology that makes Dhaka a particularly difficult place to do this kind of construction. So, Chairman, you have the floor for perhaps 7 minutes or so. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amir Siddiq. I am the Managing Director of the Dhaka Mass Rapid Transit Company Limited. And we had a vision, and to achieve this vision, we have been working to have MRT system in the Dhaka city. Vision is moving people and saving time and environment. Actually, what does it mean? It means that we will improve the environment as well as we will work to reduce the traffic congestion at the Dhaka city. And to achieve that vision, we have a long mission. I will not expect to that one. Okay. So this is the task of the DMTCL. I think this is familiar to everybody, so I will not go in details to this task next. So this is very important. As the moderator has already said, Dhaka is a very complex city. So if we look back in the 17th century, we will find that Dhaka was an urban city. And from the 17th century, we are here in 2023. So, and this city never, we don't get the opportunities to be a developed city up to 2009. And if you look at the population of the Dhaka city, it is really a very densely populated city of the world. And the number of the motor vehicles is increasing day by day. Now it is more than 1.9 billion registered motor vehicles in the Dhaka city, where the area is only 306 square kilometer. And if we look at the road density, it is around 6%. And if we understand, if the road density is the around 6% per square kilometer, I mean the 6 kilometer per square kilometer, so its mobility is really very difficult and very slow. And public transport is heavily relied on the mixed traffic, mainly the buses, the rickshaws, and other small vehicles. So what is the consequence of this situation of the Dhaka city? The consequence is that the traffic congestion, heavy traffic congestions, and the huge amount of carbon emission because of the fossil fuel burning. So there is this study that was done by the World Bank. They found that in yearly about 3.8 billion US dollars economic loss per year. Then what is the way out to come out of this situation? Keeping this situation in our mind, government of Bangladesh has taken decision to introduce MRTs, BRTs, electric buses, gas-operated three-wheelers, and many others environment-friendly vehicles. So, to achieve this target, government had adopted, the DMTCL had adopted Time-Bound Action Plan 2030. And under this Time-Bound Action Plan, we have a plan to start 6 MRT lines in the Dhaka city, and that will actually cover the main areas of the Dhaka city. And people from one part of the Dhaka city could easily move to the other part of Dhaka city using the MRT network. So the very interesting thing is this Time-Bound Action Plan is adopted in the plans of the government, and it is included in the strategic transport plan. As I said, before 2019, there is no transport plan for the Dhaka city. So now there is a transport plan. And on the basis of the transport plans, we have been working to introduce BRT, MRT, and other things in the Dhaka cities. So if in the strategic transport plan, so they have identified the three ring road and 6 MRTs and 2 BRT. So if when in 2030 all these connectivities will be established, then there will be a transfer from the existing situation to the new situation. Okay. So there is another plan, that is the cities, the main cities will also be connected with the new urban core areas. So these will also have an impact that the density of the population of the main Dhaka city will reduce. People will be pushed to the new core areas. Okay. And because in the Dhaka city, most of the roads are not south, and east-west roads are very little. And so the government decided that there will be 3 ring roads and the 8 radial roads. That will ease the movement of the traffic in the Dhaka city and its adjoining areas. Okay. And then these are the network of the MRT and the BRTs. Okay. Okay, go back. Go forward. Okay. So then what is the impact? When the time-bound action plan and the strategic action plan will be implemented by 2030. So that will ease the transport of the passenger within a very short time. More people could move and reduce the use of the road vehicles and greatly reduce the use of the fossil fuel. That is, reduce the traffic congestion, increase the mobility, saving the work hours, and in each day, if just one line, MRT line 6 will be introduced in full length, then about $83.8 million, I mean the BDT will be saved, and for the vehicle operation cost about 11.8 billion will be saved. There will be a positive impact on the GDP, and that will add a different dimension and speed to the commuting system. Okay, so you know the MRT is operated by the electricity, so and it has no impact on the burning of the fossil fuel. Rather, it will have positive impact on the burning of the fossil fuel, because ultimately it will reduce the road vehicles. So, and there are challenges. The challenges is nothing but to implement the revised strategic transport plan, time-bound action plan, and introduce the inclusive public transport system, considering the last mile connectivity, ensure the electric bus services in the Dhaka city, implement the Vision 2041. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Look, we have a speaker online, and I don't know if we are going to be able. I'm not sure how the technology works.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. You can hear us, but we can't hear
Yes.
you or see you. Oh, there you are. Fantastic. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this right, but I'll give it my best. Ms. Sinem Deretas, who is the general manager of the Sehir Hatlari system in Istanbul, Turkey. And, you know, from what I understand, there have been some very interesting experiences in Istanbul, especially over the pandemic, where ferries in particular have been used as part of the broader transport system. And I'd love to hear from you, take 4 or 5 minutes perhaps, and talk about what your experience has been with trying to make you know, the public transport system a center both for development, and what you have been able to do to perhaps convince people to abandon private vehicles and use the public transport system as an option. So please.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, Turkey hit by 2 major earthquakes, which were so strong that even their aftershock were as devastating as the primary ones. Then 10 cities with approximately 13 million population living in more than 100,000 kilometers square were deeply affected. Of course, our first privilege was to help the rescue operation and to support survivals. Since highways to earthquake zone were extremely busy, we immediately dispatched 2 RoRo passenger, we said RoPax ferries to the region. These 2 RoPax ferries were inactive before earthquake. After the disaster, one served for transportation of survivors who were willing to leave the region, and it was used for transportation 600 survivors to 4 different ports away from the earthquake region. Later was berthed in Iskenderun port and served the survivors who wanted to stay in the region. The capacity of ferries was 100 to 1,200 pax, but we removed half of the seats to be able to construct new areas such as a hospital, a kindergarten, and living quarter which meet vital needs and do not exist on the ship. On the car deck, we also added cabins as a portable shower and toilet, and whole preparation completed in 24 hours with 250 people. This ship has based in the region for 32 days, has served to 3,000 people for accommodation, 4,000 people for medical issues, and 700 children as nurseries, and it continued to serve. As you may know, I'm serving in Istanbul right now, which is quite far from the recent earthquake zone, but not from its own earthquake. Indeed, we all know that there will be a major earthquake in Istanbul, which hosts more than 15 million people in 5,000 kilometers square. I could say that the most of the metropolitan cities which have around the shape Istanbul lines in east-west direction and divided into two by Bosphorus. Normally, there is a very heavy traffic in Istanbul, and almost all of these highways will be estimated to be blocked in case of major earthquake. Therefore, seaways will be extremely important. We are working on escape routes which combine airports and seaports. It is estimated that the Büyükçekmece district will be our least damaged region, and we are working on to establish a harbor complex over there, which will be served as evacuation base. Also, we are working on the integration of other transportation modes to this base. This will be our south base, and actually there will be a similar north base in Kilyos. We are also working on structural analysis of all of our piers and reinforcing them. On the other hand, some of piers in Bosphorus, which is naturally suitable for evacuation, has been designed. We also decided to gain ships that are not in our fleet, but that will be needed in the event of earthquake. We are planning to buy 4 hospital ships and prepare them especially for the earthquake. We are working on the ports in which these hospital ships are going to be located, and we are also planning to buy a cruise ship and water tankers, which is really needed. Another big problem in earthquake is to manage the available human resource. You may have ships or ferries and even very well done preparations, but without qualified staff, none of them will work. We are working on transfer plans for qualified staff from cities close to Istanbul, which are expected to do unharmed after the earthquake. In case that our piers will be damaged and out of service, we are preparing floating barges which have ferries and ships to dock. We are also storing first aid and rescue materials inside the ferries. Yes, there are the first measures that came to my mind, and we have prepared as well.
Thank you. It's very sobering. I think gives us a sense of some of the very consequential situations where public transport can play a role. Thank you very much. I'm going to go now, perhaps across the world to Sindh in Pakistan. You know, Karachi metropolitan area. Please mute if possible. Karachi metropolitan area of over 20 million people. You know, difficult though that may be, think of the floods that hit Sindh, you know, last June, and you have a sense of the challenges that Mr. Zubair Ahmed Channa has to deal with as the Managing Director of the Sindh Mass Transit Authority. So, you know, Karachi has is in the midst, like Dhaka, but in the midst of a very transformational and ambitious plan with public transport, and there are at least 3 BRT lines that I think the Green Line now actually is operational, but 2 other lines that are under construction and planning. So, Mr. Zubair, why don't you tell us about the challenge of establishing such a multiple lines and mass transit system in a city like Karachi, while you're still also dealing with building resilience to the flood. So please.
Thank you very much, Shamus. It's a pleasure to be here and then express my views and obviously the situation on behalf of the government. Karachi is one of the biggest city and is as a cosmopolitan city we will call, and then this is not only a city, it's purely a hub of all the entire, we will call it a small Pakistan, rather than because it represents all the ethnic and otherwise cultural values of this entire country. We have a population of more than 22, 23 million, and there is a migration of almost 1 million people on a daily basis coming and going out for the business and other purposes also. So this is a huge challenge which otherwise a city like Karachi is facing in terms of the mobility and movement of the people, not only within the city but also people coming from outside and going inside. We have overall in the population, we also assess that more than 45% of the population use the public transport. And the public transport which we have today is very obsolete in terms of like the old Bradford and other Hino trucks or the buses which are being used, which were late 80s and subsequently been maintained, operated from the formal and informal transport systems, and that's how it has been used. Since late 80s we have been facing these challenges, and then in the early 2006 and 7 there was a requirement of having a complete transportation plan for the city, and then in 2012 a complete transformation plan of the BRTS system as well as the circular railway was planned, which actually gave us the major 6 BRT lines which are interconnected, and subsequently a circular railway of more than 45 kilometers which were connecting and supporting and taking out the people from all those BRT and reaching out to each and every corner of the city. We have, as of today, since 2012, we started working on the first BRT line, which was almost 78 kilometers long, which we completed in 2019, and since 1.5 years this is in operation. Another small orange line that was also started and that is also completed, and we also started the operations of these. The 2 out of 7 BRT lines which were designed in 2012 are as of today constructed and operated as well. Subsequently, there are 2, one with the World Bank funding. We are also having another 21 kilometer long BRT line which is under the design phase, and we intend to start up the construction phase by the start of next financial year. Asian Development Bank also supported the government, and we have another 23 kilometers long red line which is funded by the Asian Development Bank, AIB and FDA, and that's also in the middle of the construction phase, and we are hoping that by end of next financial year we will be completing the construction and operating that red line as well. Again, that's not the much what is required, because the only requirement of the city like Karachi will be done once we have a complete circular railway connecting all these BRT lines. The challenge is what we are facing, and that's true while we've been here since last Tuesday, we've been hearing so much about transforming from the old fossil fuel to the hybrid, and from hybrid to the electrification. We need to understand the major challenge which the cities like countries like Pakistan and also cities like Karachi are facing. It's easier said than done that we want transformation from A place to B, because that's money at the end of the day which is required. And obviously we all understand there's a huge amount of the money which is required to transform a diesel bus to a hybrid and subsequently to electrical bus requires at least more than $250,000 per bus, not only for the bus. There is a huge infrastructure at the back of it, and then subsequently maintenance cost which is at the back of it. And then when it's government which is doing purely, it's a huge money which is required. When you are going to a public-private partnership, then there is again a commitment from the government side which is required over a period depending on your revenues in terms of fare, non-fare, and subsequently also in terms of if anything at all happens, we need to secure the investment of the private investor. So that's the area where we are facing, and that's an area which we intend to highlight in the forum like this and find out a solution which are more inclusive, more sustainable, more stable. And what I understand that the middleman in terms of the private investor who is bringing in any kind of investment, maybe the electrical buses and hybrid buses, should be actually carved out, and we can have a direct connectivity with the manufacturer and then the government with the forums like World Bank, where these connectivity can be structured to a way that the cost of middleman intervention in terms of only procurement, not the operation, procurement of the huge fleet. And I understand we, city like Karachi, require more than 10,000 buses in a next 10 to 20 years to actually overcome the requirement of the carbon emission. The buses which we are today using is, and I can narrate it with the COVID, where the entire city was without any mobility, and we could see the clear skyline that what actually otherwise we now see today, that the what impact of the carbon emission from these vehicles are actually making to our own climates in the city. It's a clear skyline we saw in the COVID, and today what we see is the clear implication of what we are doing with the city. So to transform and come to that point, we need to come up with an inclusive and sustainable solution so that we can not only sustain private investment, operations, as well as the government's own kitty to understand and take such a big undertaking for completely shifting from the diesel to the hybrid and subsequent to the electrical. This good to do is to tell you that this forum that today we have almost completed of those 2 BRTs. We are not using the purely diesel. We are using the hybrid buses, so that we are looking at least reduction of more than 60% of the carbon emission. Subsequently, the red line, which is supported by the 18 band, we are not going for any biofuel, whereas we do have a huge cattle colony that we are using biomethane for running those buses, of more than 300 buses. And we are also, for the red line, we are again, the yellow line, we are again considering the World Bank to bring in the hybrid as well as the electrical buses with the sustainable model which we are doing. So we are doing it to the level of BRTs, but that's not enough. We have to come up with all the feeding services and other to actually bring in and give the commuter and the end mile movement to their houses or maybe their workplaces. Only then we'll be in a position to do. Another major challenge like city like Karachi is the informal sector, because it's a huge informal sector who's been working since last half of a century with this. So what the government is doing today is, number one, is providing the alternate options, which we are doing. Then subsequently, once the commuter has the alternate, only then we'll be in a position to enforce the replacement of the informal sector, and that's a huge challenge which we are looking forward to. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You know, I have to say that the challenge of going from diesel to hybrid, electric, very formidable. But I have to believe that the biggest decarbonization impacts is still going to be in what you are able to do in convincing people who would otherwise perhaps use a private vehicle to switch. We have to be able to do probably as a community a better job of talking about it, so that that is taken as part of the narrative that people are looking at. But why don't we, I stay in Pakistan, because you talked about money. And I think when we look at the problems that Dr. Wasim Akram, who runs the Punjab Mass Transit Authority, which includes not just Lahore, where they have a BRT line and a LRT line, but also the possibility of extending BRTs in the next tier of cities. Punjab is where my father is from, so for me it's a little bit always more exciting when I hear about Lahore and Faisalabad. So, but I have to say that the challenge that he has is one of financial sustainability. So, Dr. Akram, why don't you talk about the problems and the challenges and how you're dealing with them in Punjab before we will then shift gears a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shamik. It's a pleasure to have sit here and brief about the case of BRTs in Lahore. Similar to Dhaka and Karachi, the challenges and issues what we have truly reflected in the picture, where the school children, unsafe travel for the school children, three-wheeler, buses, congestion, pollution, and there are no space for the pedestrians. So there was a study conducted in 2005 where there was identification of 4 lines in Lahore, and the work on the first line was started in 2010. Lahore has a population of around 14 million people and a very high rate of registered motor vehicle, that is around 7 million. So 14 million people, 7 million vehicles. And out of that 7 million vehicles, 80% are the two-wheelers. So there are a lot of two-wheeler trip on the daily basis, which not only reduces the capacities of the roads, but creates the safety issues and the environmental issues for the city. The first line was opened in 2012, and it was BRT line, and the second LRT line was opened in October 2020. So where the problem started? Last 2 years we went smoothly for last 8 and 10 years, but for last 2 years these energy prices went high. Inflation in Pakistan always on rise for last 1 year and so, and consequently the interest rates, it is now 20%. So it has become difficult for the private operators to finance their buses and the rolling stock and their human resource. For the case of BRT, we have a gross cost contract where we pay for a kilometer basis, and we have provided a guarantee to the private operator of 60,000 kilometers per bus per year. So this is a detail little bit about the business model. So all things went on the either side. So the problem started where the revenues and the cost gap suddenly started to widen. So what we are doing for to get rid of this financial challenge, this is not only a challenge, it could be a barrier for the expansion of the BRTs, not only in Lahore but in other cities, because the treasury and finance, they are all always comparing the money they are giving to transport department for running those services. And there is another debate, the economic benefit we have got in terms of the green transport agenda and reducing the congestion in the city. That is another value addition which these BRT lines have done. So what we have planning to focus, first is the ridership increase. So these are two interesting scenarios. For the BRTs, the feasibility says that we will have around 100,000 people, passengers. After operations of 10 years or so, on average it is running about 40% more what the feasibility says. On the other hand, when we talk about the rail, it started during the COVID era, post-COVID in 2020, and authorities were concerned that due to the change in the travel pattern of the passengers, the ridership is on the lower side. The feasibility says that it could be 250,000 passengers per day, but on very first month it was around 70 to 80,000 passengers. But that trend goes on for 6-7 months, then we have to think and we sit together and intervene. We do have some kind of flat fare structure for these BRTs that was started from the day first, and it was rather more of a political decision. If I translate today, 27 kilometers, so a passenger pays only 10 cents. I think it's unable to recover the cost with paying 10 cents for the 27 kilometers. So what we have planned, we have focused on the ridership, how to increase the ridership. Main focus is on the Orange Line rail transport, where we are learning from the lessons of the Bogota. We will look forward for the increase in the speed and looking into the integration of the services. We do have feeder routes, and we are planning to induct 300 hybrid diesel buses to feed those LRT lines, so that the ridership can be increased on these to achieve the capacity for which it was planned. Recently we have got approval from the provincial government, where we are planning to introduce the personalized and discount cards. We will introduce monthly, weekly cards, where we expect that large segment of the population, including the students, working women, and the daily commuters, will avail that opportunity, and we will be able to increase the ridership. Uh, there are another problem we are facing in terms of the three-wheelers. The three-wheelers are running parallel to these metro lines, and they have some kind of political protection, I would say. It's very difficult to realign, but we are coming up with some kind of plan where we can shift these three-wheelers and operate as a first and last mile connectivity services. So it could also help us to improve the ridership and connectivity for the passenger in the city. Our second strategy is about the revision of the fare. What we had done in case of metro rail, we have shifted from flat fare to distance-based fare, and there is an increase of say 60% in 4 months. So we are planning to apply the same distance-based fare for the metro bus system, and there is a very good case for revision of the fare, and we compare with the competitive mode. So there is an provision for making the double the rate what the commuters are paying for these lines now. Another area which we are focusing to achieve the financial sustainability is the non-fare revenue. So there are huge spaces available for these metro rail. We are planning to lease out these spaces for commercial purposes. We are also thinking about the branding of these buses, rail systems, and the corridors. Apart from that, we are also thinking about some kind of real estate development. The authority will be provided by the government some piece of land, and some commercial development could be planned, and that income from that commercial development will be used for providing this subsidy to these lines. Another measure is also under consideration, but we need to make assessment in terms of applying the parking levy, which has been done in Australian city, but it is a political difficult decision to implement. World Bank is also providing us support. Recently, they have allocated a grant for Lahore, where they are comparing the BRT lines Lahore, Karachi, and Peshawar, and how to achieve the financial sustainability for these lines. It will be a very interesting study, and it depends the outcomes, and probably we will get some insight apart from what we are planning to do to get these challenges fixed in a better way. So the sustainability of these BRT lines is very much associated with the financial sustainability and the future expansion of these BRT lines. Thank you.
Let's focus on getting operational sustainability before I would suggest we start looking at the next technology of buses. But let that be a personal opinion here. Let us now switch gears completely and look at a very different kind of problem that Ms. Erika, should I say Ritchie? Hecke, I should have known that. Hecke is confronting. You know, the municipalities of Vale Itajaí are in the south of Brazil, one of the richest parts of the country, dealing with the problem of how to attract riders in a place where auto ownership is at least probably at European levels, if not at US levels. And they are looking at a system of BRT lines. So why don't you talk about the challenges in developing a feasible and viable BRT and attracting people who would otherwise use cars to that.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here on behalf of the 11 mayors of Foz do Rio Itajaí region, which I would like to greet in the person of our president, Mr. Paulo Henrique Dalago Miller. We are here to present to you all our innovative transportation project, which is 100% electric and implemented by a public consortium. the Foz do Rio Itajaí region in the state of Santa Catarina, south of Brazil, comprises 11 municipalities, namely Balneário Camboriú, Balneário Pissarras, Bombinhas, Camboriú, Ilhota, Itapema, Itajaí, Luiz Alves, Navegantes, Penha, and Porto Belo. And together, they are about 1,000 people, 1 million people, so very small cities. Promobis, our project, Integrated Sustainable Mobility Project in the Foz do Rio Itajaí region, has a BRT system with a bus fleet 100% electric and an immersed tunnel connecting two cities, Itajaí and Navegantes, and complete streets in Balneário Camboriú, which also connect two other cities, Balneário Camboriú and Camboriú. We think that the most important thing to present to you all today is our institutional arrangements, because it's the first time in World Bank history that a public consortium will be financed by the World Bank. And it's the first time that a public consortium in Brazil will do an external credit operation. And why this is so important? Because instead of sitting and wait for the state or for the union to solve regional problems, local difficulties as move people in an urban conurbation, the municipalities can empowerment themselves to think and implement solutions together as a region. And we, the municipalities, cannot expect that individually small and medium cities will solve population problems like transportation. Because one, people don't need to leave their homes and transit only in the same city. They need to go to work, they need to go to study in tourism and business districts. And workers and students live far from their jobs and their universities. They work and study in different cities than they live. Therefore, cities must think together to really promote inclusive development. Two, together, as a public consortium, for example, these small and medium cities can access financial resources that are crucial to implementing public policies as transportation. Well, when we, Balneário Camboriú, Balneário Pissarras, Bombinhas, Camboriú, Ilhota, Itajaí, Itapema, Luiz Alves, Navegantes, and Porto Belo would think that someday we will be at the World Bank planning our regional mobility project, but here we are. And how we did this? We did this by creating a public consortium to act as a public authority for the region to implement strategic projects that require strong regional coordination and policies that promote sustainable development in the region. And how we make this work? First, this must be a bottom-up approach. The municipalities must be the owners of this solution, the decision makers. Then it will really work. This is sense of belonging. And the public consortium must have technical people that stays through the years, regardless political mandates. We started Promobis in 2026, and we have already passed through 4 presidents in Brazil, 5 governors in the state of Santa Catarina, and 3 municipal elections. Therefore, we really believe that public consortium is the key to transform the cities, not only in Santa Catarina, not only in Brazil, but all around the world. Municipalities can think solutions together as a region, especially in urban conurbation. Public consortium is the key to empowerment the region with the public authority necessary to implement projects together, especially small cities. We need to innovate to transform, get together to achieve the metropolitan goals. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic. You know, we talk about institutional innovations, but we know those are the hardest to actually get done. So congratulations for that. Look, we have one final speaker, and we've heard about a range of systems which people have developed in very, very challenging situations. And now we will talk about technology, but not bus technology. And not public transport technology, but a key building block technology. We're going to talk about fare systems. Public transport has been flirting with innovations in fare card technology for a while, and for a while we have known that a lot of the innovations to kind of break some of the challenges of fare issues and to break a lot of the equity efficiency trade-off sometimes we look like we are forced to make lie with the sophistication in fare systems. Bogota, of course, has done a lot in that. But Nick, who is from Visa, is going to talk about what the frontier is, what Visa is doing, and how this technology can start changing the way public transport systems think about their limitations. Nick, and after that, the time we have, we will open up for questions.
Thank you, Shamik, and thank you to all of the panelists. It's been an intriguing discussion, and look forward to continuing. It's really great to be here. We're really thrilled to be sponsors of this event. So I suppose, really from Visa's standpoint, the part of transit that we're trying to transform is helping people to get onto the transport. So we're not going to get in the business of making buses and trains or even running them. Instead, what we want to try and do is our very best to help people get on board with public transport as easily and frictionlessly as possible. So my name is Nick Mackey. I head up our global urban mobility group at Visa worldwide. So we're a relatively small group that sort of builds solutions, frameworks, and capabilities that help people to get on board with public transport just that bit more easily. And I think it's been mentioned already several times that urban mobility plays such a key role in making our cities sustainable, livable, inclusive. We've heard all of those words just in this panel alone. But it's also the case that public transport is the backbone of our cities, right? It helps drive the economies of those cities and the economies of nations in turn. And I think it would be fair also to say that it also plays right to the heart of Visa's global mission as a company, which is to uplift everyone everywhere by being the best way to pay and be paid. So we've spent around the last 10 years, believe it or not, standing up all sorts of transportation projects all over the world. Like literally, there's almost not a market that we're not active in. And for example, we have now over 650 locations worldwide where you can tap with a card, a wearable device, or a mobile device like I'm holding here with my notes to get on board with public transport. It's kind of made access to public transport as easy as buying a coffee or something as mundane and as simple as that. And that's very much a great example of how we do what we do. But there's other ways to pay as well. That could be in-app, as well as a number of other ways. So with a simple tap of a device to get on board, the same device often that you use for everything else in your daily life, you can get on board, or indeed through a click on an app. So as it happens, just last week in London at a large transportation event, some of you may be aware of it, we actually published a white paper which summarizes in much better detail and much more eloquently than I ever could here the sort of impact that our projects to date have had on the transportation space. So let me just give you 3 quick stats there, if I may, and I'm going to come to the heart of your question, Shmook. So first up, our survey, which is one of the largest of its kind, so please, by the way, grab a copy of this downstairs at the Visa booth if you're happening to pass, or search for reimagining ridership on Google or your favorite search engine, and you'll find it right there. So the first stat is that nearly a half of all people that live in cities would use more public transport, would make more use of the brilliant systems that are being implemented if it were just easier to pay for it. A half of people. Think of the untapped potential there, if you'll forgive the pun. The second one is that in cities where contactless travel or tap to ride, I'm just picking up on that example again, has been made available, we've seen a nearly 10% uplift in ridership. What I'd like to know is what else in terms of transport innovation has delivered that size of uptick so quickly? And the third one is that of those agencies surveyed, 83% of them that don't currently have tap to pay are planning to implement it, which is kind of remarkable. That's nearly 4 in 5 of all the agencies. So think on those stats, and please do grab a copy of our paper on the way out, or download it, as I said. But back to your question, Shamik. In order for us to be truly inclusive, that must mean that we leave no rider behind. This can't just be a payment option for those fortunate enough to be in possession of a debit or a credit card, right? This has got to be available to everyone, everywhere, right? Again, back to the core of our mission. And so what we've made available as well as part of the program that we lead on is a suite of solutions that are designed specifically for people who have maybe struggled in the past to get access to a debit or credit card. And so these are therefore solutions that are available to everyone. They're based on Visa prepaid technology and Visa private label technology. Don't worry about understanding the technicalities of that, but just be familiar with the idea that these are credentials that are available to everyone everywhere, okay? You either download it straight to your smartphone, because many people actually are more likely to have access to a smartphone, believe it or not, than access to a bank account. And so they can download the credential or get a physical version of it if they would prefer, and they can go ahead and load money onto that using traditional methods, so again, ticket vending machines and these types of things, or they can load another form of digital currency onto the card. And so these solutions, we feel, are not just helping kind of people get on board with public transport. We're helping people get on in life. We're helping people become more financially included and helping sort of bring the world along in that respect. So we've got projects, and we chatted about this just earlier, Shamik, around the world that we can pick examples on that are specific to the Pay in Advance project that I mentioned, using these prepaid and private label credentials. We have projects in as broad-ranging countries as Guatemala to India, and then of course Ukraine. We also have the DRC in Africa. So these are really interesting places where we're using, if you will, the opportunity in urban mobility as a catalyst and as a driver for financial inclusion, something that we're really, really excited about. And so final point for me before we hand to the discussion is sustainability. Again, I touched on it earlier, and I think it's been mentioned way more on this discussion, but it's absolutely fundamental. You know, the role that Visa is playing in helping get people on board with public transport makes that a more compelling way to get from A to B. Hopefully, in turn, it will have a knock-on impact, and it will compel people to maybe stop using private vehicles as much and get them on board with public transport. So thank you very much again, and look forward to the discussion.
Fantastic, Nick. That was inspiring. Look, we have about 10 minutes. I thought we'd have more, but this is the way it goes. We have about 10 minutes for questions, and then Christina, who is from WRI, will give us a kind of a summary and closing statement. So why don't we entertain any questions that people have? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's start with those 4. Please, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jaman Kibber from the International Transport Workers Federation. So a quick comment and a question. So the comment is on your point on imagining what the situation is. The reality is that the the IPCC last year did analysis which found that just increasing and improving public transport itself would be a key way of decarbonising, and that's regardless of fuel source. So the key is actually expanding public transport. That's fact. That's not an imagining thing. That's just reality. The question for us is how to
reimagining the narrative, not the facts.
Exactly that. So the question for us is how do you make that as inclusive as possible? And one thing we've been doing around BRT systems is starting to do impact assessments, talking to people who are impacted, so informal workers, existing workers, future workers. Often that process isn't done, so my question is to the panelists, how are you making sure that the workers who are keeping these systems going are part of the process from the beginning? Thank you.
Please. Yes, you. Sorry. Yeah.
So my question is really for Nick Mackey about these cards. How are they different than the card I get at my local transit agency, where I can either have it online, where I can fill it online, or I can go to a machine and get it out. And then also the question is there a charge on top of by using a Visa card?
So I'm just going to get all 4 questions. Sorry. We are now at this, please.
Hi, I'm Thais Fonseca. I'm a transport specialist at the World Bank. I'm actually the chat moderator, so this question is not for me, it's from the chat. So the question is to Erica, from Ellen from Brazil. She says the difficulties of institutional arrangement for planning, financing, and implementing efficient mass transportation pose a challenge to every city in the world, right? So Itajaí, as a consortium, serves as a great example how it could work. And it's the first consortium in Brazil to assess criteria operations. So considering this, what are the barriers you anticipate that other cities in Brazil or other countries would face to replicate this model? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jonas Mchomvu, Senior Transport Specialist, World Bank. I have a question to Lahore, a Pakistan colleague. I think the issue of financial sustainability is really a major issue for most of our cities, especially because we end up with a situation where the demand which is anticipated during appraisal or project design does not get realized. So I see most of the strategies which you have in place are a bit of medium to long term. So I have 2 small questions. One is, who is now footing the bill, and what is the really sort of ballpark numbers, for example, per month? And if you were to design the project, differently, what would you really need to address as part of the project design? Thank you.
Okay, so I have been given the 5-minute warning, and we have to have the answers as well as the closing remarks. So I would ask, the 3 who have been speakers who have been asked, and then one other speaker to come in and answer these questions. Really, you have to take less than a minute each, so we give Christina some time. Nick, you want to start?
Happy to. Is this on? Yeah. So it's a really quick one, maybe 20 seconds. So they essentially work exactly the same way, so they would be reloaded in the same way. The kind of the commercial framework for the end user is exactly the same. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that by using open standards-based technology, EMV happens to be the technology that's used for these cards. It is more widely available. It tends to be the direction that infrastructure is moving. And so there's, in terms of like the capabilities of using those can be extended beyond just public transport. So for instance, a Visa prepaid card could maybe initially be issued just for use within a public transport agency, but if that customer then chooses to log in, enroll, and activate the account for use everywhere, then they can do that as well. And so this is the point about financial inclusion.
Fantastic. Erica, less than a minute.
In the state of, in the Santa Catarina, the municipalities have culture of work together. Our region has been organized about 50 years. So I think, in my opinion, the first and most difficult is to implement the culture to work together, you know, because in Brazil, the bylaws are ready to be used. You know, we have the public consortium law, we have the regulament, all the regulaments implemented. But to implement the culture of working together, this is the most difficult thing that I can see now. So we need to transform our culture, and the municipalities must work together. They need to see the benefits that are in front of them if they work together.
Thank you. Dr. Akram, less than a minute.
Yes, I will respond to the project design. What we have learned from our experiences that the development, the land use planning should be part of the design of the metro system from the day one. There are potential opportunities for the revenue stream and the financial sustainability for that particular area, and the integration providing the connectivity and the last and first mile connectivity. So these are the few areas which need to be focused in project design, and one of the reason for this financial challenge is in terms of that we have done the corridors, not the integrated system and the networks, so where we make some mistake. Regarding the cost, we are paying 36 million US dollar annual for these two systems in terms of subsidy, and if we compare with the revenue and the cost, so in case of Metrobus, we are getting 30% of the cost, operational cost, that is not the capex, operational cost from the fare box, and for the case of LRT, it is around 12% of the total operational cost. Thank you.
You know, we are just now going to have, I'm going to invite you to come up front and have a discussion on your question because we are out of time, but I'm going to ask Christina to give us her closing remarks and then we finish.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think it's been a really good panel here. Just to give some words, I think we hear a lot of really good examples for different places in the world, how we need to innovate and combine the solutions to really be able to achieve our overall goals for sustainable mobility, having public transport as a main pillar for our networks in cities. So innovating on the governance schemes is an example in Brazil, but also having more infrastructure to prioritize public transport systems, but also how we can connect with non-motorized transport as part of this network if we need to bring people from cars and be more sustainable in our cities to reach our overall goals, and also how we are going to include in these really near future years there's decarbonizing the fleets. So I think it's not one thing or other things. We need to do everything together right now. We are on a rush to implement really sustainable solutions in our cities that are decarbonized. So we need to keep having these really good examples and how we can combine the solutions to really have our cities being planned and for people, and not having more spaces and more infrastructures for cars, and really bringing people to the center of our planning. And we can see we are doing a really good job in a lot of different geographies, and we need to have spotlighting these a little bit more and be inspired to replicate this in other places. So I think we are a little bit over time already. Just want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you all for attending, and thank you to the speakers. Inspiring session, and we kept it more or less on time. Thank you.